Thomas had always believed that life's beauty lay in its simplicity. He lived on a small farm just outside the sleepy town of Oakwood. The land here was modest, nothing fancy, just rolling hills, a few grazing cows, and fields that he tended to every morning. Thomas had lived here for as long as he could remember. His father had worked the same land before him, and now it was his turn. Every morning, Thomas rose with the sun, the cool morning air filling his lungs as he walked across the fields, his boots crunching the damp earth beneath him. His life was simple but fulfilling. The quiet rhythm of the farm brought him peace, and the connection to the land was something he held dear. On one particular evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas was returning from the nearby woods after checking the perimeter of his farm, when he noticed something unusual. A small bird, no bigger than the palm of his hand, lay on the ground, barely moving. Its feathers were ruffled, and its tiny chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Without hesitation, Thomas knelt down beside the bird. He knew little about birds, but he knew enough to see that the creature was in trouble. His heart ached as he gently cupped the bird in his hands, his thumb stroking its soft feathers. "I can't just leave you here," he whispered softly, his voice steady despite the urgency he felt. Thomas took the bird home, carefully placing it in a small wooden box lined with hay. The warmth of the kitchen surrounded him as he lit a lamp and began to tend to the bird. His hands, calloused from years of farm work, moved with tenderness as he cleaned the tiny wounds on its wing and fed it a few drops of water. As he worked, he wondered if the bird would survive. It seemed so fragile, its body so small in comparison to the world around it. But Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that this small act of kindness might lead to something greater. After all, he had always believed in helping others whenever possible, no matter how small the act might seem. The next few days passed in a blur as Thomas tended to the bird, carefully monitoring its recovery. He placed it in a quiet corner of the barn during the day, where it could get some sunshine, and brought it inside at night to keep it safe from the chill. Slowly but surely, the bird regained strength, its eyes brightening with each passing day. And as it grew stronger, so did Thomas's curiosity. He couldn't help but wonder if this small creature's presence in his life was part of some greater purpose, even if he couldn't quite see what that might be. As the days went by, Thomas noticed something odd. The neighbors, who had always been friendly but distant, started showing up at his farm more frequently. At first it was just a wave and a nod, but soon enough they stopped by for longer chats, helping with small tasks, offering advice, and even bringing over food or tools. The kindness of others seemed to flow towards him, and Thomas couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to them. One afternoon, as he was walking the fields, he noticed the bird had started to flutter around the barn, testing its wings. It was no longer the fragile creature he had found days earlier. The small animal had transformed, its feathers glistening in the sun as it took short flights, soaring higher with each attempt. Thomas felt a sense of pride as he watched the bird regain its independence. He felt like a small part of the bird's journey, an unexpected chapter in both their lives. But there was more to the story than he knew. The weather had been unusually kind that season, with plenty of rain and warm sunlight. It was the sort of year where crops thrived and the land seemed to be offering a gift, almost as if in response to the small act of kindness he had shown to the bird. But one morning, something would happen that would leave Thomas speechless. Early one crisp morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise, Thomas ventured out to his field to check on the crops. The air was cool and still, the ground damp beneath his boots. As he walked, he noticed something strange, a glint of something metallic just beneath the surface of the soil. His heart raced, curiosity pulling him toward it. He knelt down, his hands digging into the earth, and slowly uncovered what appeared to be an old chest. It was small, its edges worn and weathered by time. As he brushed the dirt away, he saw that the chest was made of pure gold, its intricate carvings shining brightly in the early light. Thomas's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the chest. Could this be some kind of treasure? How could it have ended up buried in his field? His mind raced with questions, but one thought remained clear. This discovery was connected to the bird somehow. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that his act of kindness had somehow triggered this event. It was as if the universe had rewarded him for his compassion, though he couldn't fully understand why. But it didn't matter. This was a moment that felt bigger than anything he had ever experienced. As Thomas held the golden chest in his hands, he felt a wave of emotions wash over him. It wasn't just the shock of finding treasure in his own field, but the realization that this all stemmed from one simple, selfless act. Helping that bird had led him here, to this extraordinary moment. He sat down on the ground, the chest resting on his lap, and stared at the sky. He thought about all the little acts of kindness he had done over the years, never expecting anything in return. He had never believed in rewards, but now, as he gazed at the golden chest, he began to understand something deeper. Sometimes the universe has a way of returning kindness in ways that are completely unexpected. But for Thomas, the true reward wasn't the chest itself. It was the lesson he had learned. Kindness, no matter how small, always finds its way back to you. Thomas smiled softly as he looked at the bird, now soaring freely above his fields. It had regained its strength, its wings outstretched as it flew high into the sky. In that moment, Thomas understood. The real treasure wasn't the gold chest, but the simple act of kindness that had led him here. He rose to his feet, the chest still in his hands, and walked back to his house, feeling content. The world was full of surprises, but sometimes it took a small act of kindness to unlock them. And as the bird flew overhead, Thomas knew that no matter what came next, his heart would always be full, filled with the kind of gratitude that only comes from doing something good in the world.